Welcome, everyone. I'm Teresa Ray with the Virginia Bar Association. The VBA is Virginia's leader in AI education for lawyers, and we are proud to present this new resource free of charge for all Virginia lawyers and law firms. I hope you're as excited as I am about the VBA Model Artificial Intelligence Policy. We have two of the policy's authors here today to put the policy in context for you and explain its rationales. I hope you'll find this session and the VBA model policy helpful as you consider adopting an AI policy for your own firm. A couple of housekeeping notes. This session is not approved for CLE credit, first of all. And second, if you have questions as we go along, please put those in the chat and our speakers will answer as many as possible during a couple of scheduled question breaks as we go along. As I mentioned, both of our speakers were leaders in developing this VBA model AI policy for law firms, and we're honored to have them here with us today to present the new VBA model policy for you. Since 2015, Tricia Dunlap has bootstrapped Dunlap Law from a solo practice to a 6-lawyer team serving businesses and nonprofits with results-focused billing and subscription plans. Tricia is a tenacious, visionary leader disrupting the traditional law firm model and reinventing how Dunlap Law educates and empowers business leaders. Tricia's work has been featured in Virginia Business Magazine, the VBA Journal, Richmond Biz Sense, Today's General Counsel, and Business Law Today, among others. She has been recognized among the go-to lawyers for business, the legal elite, super lawyers, influential women of law, and RVA Power Women in 2024. Likewise, Tricia's firm Dunlap Law has been recognized by Virginia Lawyers Weekly as a law firm on the move and a firm with a track record of empowering women. Steve Brown is the managing partner of Eisler Dare's Richmond office. For 34 years, his practice has focused on providing creative strategies to manage labor, employment, and business issues with private and public employers. In addition to providing advice and counsel, Steve also represents clients in labor and employment law litigation. He's admitted to practice in Connecticut, Florida, North Carolina, and Virginia. Alongside his avid support of JMU athletics, Steve has been an active member and leader in the Virginia Bar Association for 25 years and currently serves on the VBA's Board of Governors. This spring, Steve was named co-chair of the VBA's new task force on artificial intelligence and the law. Tricia, Steve, thank you for being here today. But before I turn the program over to our speakers, here's a quick look at what you can expect from this hour. We'll spend a few minutes each on some background about the policy and its objectives. And then the bulk of our time will cover specific policy provisions. And finally, we'll give you some information about accessing the policy and other AI resources. If time allows, Steve and Tricia will be happy to answer questions near the middle and at the end of the program. So remember to put those in the chat. And that's enough from me. It's time to turn the program over to Steve Brown. Steve?
Well, good to see everybody. Well, I can't really see you, but I know you can see me. So good to have you on. Appreciate your time and appreciate doing this with Tricia and Teresa. And I want to thank the VBA for putting this on. A couple things we'll talk about in terms of the background for the model AI policy that we put together. We are, as the VBA, really have been the leader in putting together AI education for lawyers. We're going to continue to do that. And this really arose out of the Committee on Small Firms and Solo Practice that the VBA has. I chaired that up until recently. Tricia is a member of that committee. And so out of that committee was born this policy. As we decided to take that on as one of our tasks, is to put together a policy that law firms could adopt. We realize as we go through this that there might be provisions of this that you like or you don't like, or that you want to model or take, you may want to create something different for your firm. that's all well and good. We're not saying that our policy is the end all be all, but it is a model policy for you to be able to use as a law firm. Part of the Committee on Small Firms and Solo Practice, there was an AI subcommittee that worked extensively on this policy. We had a number of folks that were part of that subcommittee, and I want to thank them. I don't want to list them all because I'll forget someone. So I'm just thanking you all as a subcommittee as the whole. So please know that we do appreciate you. We do have a new VBA task force on artificial intelligence that Tricia mentioned. Ben Lay, the former president of the VBA, and I are chairing that. We're putting together a task force now, putting together members of that task force. We have a number of people that have said they want to be part of it. If anybody on this call is interested, please send us your name. You'll have my email address. I think you already have it, but if you don't, you'll see it at the end. So feel free to let me know if you're interested in serving on that task force. We're doing a multidisciplinary approach to all this and understanding how AI works. If you're going to ask Tricia and I AI questions on how to do searches, we're going to tell you that that's for a different time and for you to tune in to some of the other educational opportunities the VBA will have. We have used AI, both of us have. We do use it every day, but we're not the experts on how to do searches. We will give you some things as we talk on how we do this, but we're not going to get into exactly how to do it. Tricia, I'll go to the next slide if you're ready. So let's talk about, there's some state bars that have issued some AI guidance. The Virginia ethics rules do apply. We have a number of ethics rules. This is not an ethics seminar, but I'll highlight some of these for you. Rule 1.1 deals with competence as a lawyer, and we shall provide competent representation to our clients. That includes learning AI and learning new things for folks. Some of you on this call, not a lot of you, but some of you are my age, and some of you remember when we didn't have Westlaw and Lexis. I remember when I was in school, we had one computer terminal. When I was at JMU, I was getting a paralegal minor, and part of it was legal research. And we had one computer terminal. And I remember our teacher saying to us, this is in 1982, hey, there's something on here called LexisNexis, and we'll be able to do searches for the law. And we all laughed. And we said, yeah, that's great, but we have a law library. I don't need a computer. We'll go to the law library and look at the books. And from that standpoint, if you can think back to 1982, how short-sighted that was. Nobody looks at books much anymore. I still have books. I don't look at a lot of them. I do it online. And if you can think about what was it, 42 years ago? Think about the changes we'll see in AI between now and 42 years into the future. Right now, everybody feels scared of dealing with AI. You shouldn't. You've been dealing with AI for years if you've used Google and any of those other things that you've used on the internet. That's all AI-based. So rule 1.1 is to be competent. The next rules we'll go through them quickly. 1.3 is diligence. You need to act in a reasonable, diligent way with your client. Part of that is learning how to use AI. Rule 1.4 is communication. You must keep your clients reasonably informed. Part of that's going to be that you're using AI. Rule 1.6, confidentiality of information. If you're using an AI tool, especially if you're using an open source tool, again, we're not going to get into too technical difficulty, but too much technical information. But open source means anybody can see your search. So if you put a client's name in there, or you put confidential information into an open search, anybody that's then running a different search looking for what you were looking for can see your client's information. So you're going to want to be in a closed system. Lexis has a closed system. Westlaw does. A variety of people do. Rule 5.1 is responsibility of partners and supervisory lawyers to make sure you're supervising assistants and associate lawyers, so that when they're using AI or they're using any tool in your practice, you have an obligation to supervise them. And rule 7.1 is you can't make false or misleading communication, about the lawyer or the services that you're using. All those are folded into this policy. So we looked at a variety of things as we did this policy based on the ethics rules that apply. So remember, it's a resource for you. It's not regulatory authority in terms of this policy, but it's a resource. And let me turn this now over to Tricia.
Okay. Well, because of everything that Steve just said, we, of course, as good lawyers, have a disclaimer at the top of our policy. And I'm going to touch on 3 big points that are in that disclaimer. First of all, you really need to revisit whatever policy your firm adopts, whether you take all of what we have and adopt it whole cloth, or whether you take what you like and leave the rest. Feel free to do whatever you want, But whatever policy you adopt, you should put a tickler on your calendar to come back and revisit that policy at least annually. I literally have a ticker on my calendar for May 1st of next year to come back and look at this policy again to make sure that it still fits the real world adoption and use and whatever ethics LEOs might have come out, all of that. So put that tickler on your calendar so that you can meet your obligations to be diligent. And then also keep in mind that, yes, we are referencing the rules of professional conduct, but this is not definitive. And as Steve just said, it's not any kind of regulatory guidance document. So essentially, the bottom line to take away from the disclaimer is that you have to be responsible for how your firm, if you're a firm leader, you need to be responsible for how your firm will be adopting and using or not, how they will be navigating the world of AI. You've got to be in the game. So with that in mind, let's move on to the policy objectives. So, and I'm not going to read the slides. You all can do that just fine. But I want to touch on one idea about risk. Risk cannot be eliminated, just as risks from other technologies cannot be eliminated. Technologies that we rely on every single day, like email, online banking, using our smartphones. I mean, I, for one, can't imagine now living in a world without those tools, and they're never going to be risk-free. It's just a matter of mitigating the risks with appropriate safeguards. So it's important to understand the safeguards that you can put around AI in order to mitigate the risks related to AI. Now, something to keep in mind, too, is that as people get more comfortable with AI technologies, it's possible that the risks associated with AI technologies are actually going to go up. Think about this historically. We saw this happen with email, right? Email comes out, it becomes ubiquitous, and all of a sudden people are sending all sorts of sensitive documents by email that's unencrypted. Gosh, it wasn't all that long ago, I don't know, maybe 2019 or 2020, that I had another attorney send me by an unencrypted email the tax returns for his client. And yeah, that raised my eyebrows. I was like, whoa, okay, that's not safe. But we got comfortable with email and we didn't think about implications related to security because we were comfortable with it. So as your comfort level with AI goes up, remember that your risks may actually go up because we tend to get sloppy with things that we're comfortable with. So this policy can perhaps provide useful guidance for staying on your toes and not getting so comfortable that you allow in risks that really can be prevented. Policy objectives also include the importance of talking to your clients about this. You have to talk to the people within your firm and also talk to your clients about your firm's AI policy and how your firm is handling this significant change and disruption to our practice, and how your firm is regulating it within the firm itself. Perhaps talk about the policy. Whether or not you want to share the policy with your clients is up to you, of course, but it's all something to consider. Another objective that we had is actually to promote the safe and effective use of AI tools. And, you know, some people might step back and look at that and say, well, wait a minute, why would you want to promote these tools? Well, if you're not familiar with the tools and you haven't used them yet, you may not be aware of how powerful they can be. And so I'll just give you a quick example from my own personal life. My husband and I have a bunch of land out in the mountains, and we have an old farm truck that needs new tires. Well, I have no idea what kind of tires we need to get for Jackhammer, as we call our old Ford F-150. And so we went to ChatGPT and we said, we need to tow about 3,000 pounds. We need to go off-road. We need to fill the bed with, you know, logs and debris and rocks and all the other stuff that you do with a farm truck. What kind of tires do we need? And ChatGPT gave us a whole summary of the specs that we need to look for. I had no idea there's such a thing called a load index for tires. ChatGPT educated me around all of that. And then our next question was, well, do we need new rims, or are the rims that we have going to be sufficient? And it turns out we don't need new rims. So my wallet was really happy about that. ChatGPT helped us take a massive amount of information and synthesize it and distill it down so that we could go to our mechanic and have an educated conversation and not just rely solely on our mechanic's feedback, because maybe he's got some tires in stock that he'd really like to get rid of that maybe weren't quite what we need. Well, now ChatGPT has empowered us to go into that conversation more educated. So I just wanted to give that small use case of how ChatGPT, just as one tool, and there's so many other AI tools emerging. Microsoft has a Copilot tool that's really fantastic that I know some other law firms are using. We're looking at it. So yes, one of our objectives is to promote the safe and effective use of AI tools. So really get in there and start playing around if you're not doing it already. And you will be amazed at what you can learn. So that's sort of the broad overview. Oh, one last thing I want to touch on. One way to consider this policy is not just as a policy, but also as perhaps a syllabus, right? You could use this policy as a guide for your own investigation and study of AI and the implications that are going to flow out of AI, and to begin to think about how AI is going to transform our profession. So I was a teacher in my first career. And so as I'm looking at this, prepping for our call today, I'm looking at the policy guidelines, I'm looking at our objectives, and it hit me, this is a little bit like a syllabus. So if you're not really educated on AI, then you could perhaps use this policy guideline as a bit of a syllabus as well. So we hope this is helpful to you. Take as much as you like, leave what you don't like. And with that, I believe Steve is going to take it away and talk about some of the first few paragraphs in our policy.
Yep. So let's talk a little bit about training and education, really what you need to be doing. And as you know, we're all lifelong learners. So we should be, as lawyers, reviewing all kinds of things that are new. I'm going to have you go to the next slide, Tricia, if you can. And so, what we do with AI is we're learning. So part of what you should be doing, and what, Tricia just mentioned, if you haven't done this with AI, you should go in and play with it. There's tons of free options to play in. Copilot is on Microsoft, so you can do that. There's ChatGPT that's free. There's a variety of these things that are free that you can play in. As I mentioned earlier, you've been playing in Google for years, which is an AI-assisted search engine. So you might as well try some of these things. But part of what you got to do for your firm when you're looking at this policy, part of Rule 1.1 on the ethics dealing with competence is part of our CLE. So, we do CLE every year because we're required to do it. You're also required to keep up with technological changes, things like that in the law, and the ethics, require you to do it. You should want to do it anyway, because AI can help in a variety of ways with your work. Now, it's not the end all be all in your work. And what Tricia just mentioned, I thought was key. She's not relying on AI to do everything for her. It gave her a start. And I kind of see AI as the first-year associate in a lot of ways. If you remember as a first-year associate, and I apologize if you're a first-year associate, and I'm not trying to denigrate you, but first-year associates don't know a whole lot. And you can give them things to do, and they do a wonderful job, but at the end of the day, you never rely on what they give you. I remember the first-year associate I had, and I won't mention his name, many years ago. He's now a very successful in-house counsel, and he's great. But I remember giving him a project years ago, and I said, hey, can you do some research on some just basic contract things? I'm looking for some damages based on some contract issue. He came back about an hour and a half later and said, there's no damages that flow from contract violations. And I said, that's not correct. Even from law school, that there are damages that flow. I didn't find anything in my research. I said, well, let's go back and do it again. That's the same thing with AI. When AI gives you something, remember it's a tool. It's not the end all be all, and it's just going to help you start moving toward some things, but it's not going to be everything you do. Firms need to provide training. Part of what you need to do as a firm, if you're going to have folks and your folks are using AI, you need to provide formal training within your firm about AI. That's why this policy is helpful, because it allows you to put some guardrails around what you're going to do as a law firm with AI. If you've not been given training by your law firm, you should ask for it. There should be a training module in your law firm about AI, how to use AI, what it's used for and what it's not used for. And so your policy should address that, and the policy that we've given you does address that. Also, in terms of your decision-making, you can use it in some of the decision-making that you're doing. I mentioned that just a few minutes ago, but you don't rely on everything that you get from AI. So for example, I use it for a variety of things. So yesterday I was putting together some training material for a client. And so I just fed into AI. Of course, I didn't use a client's name, but just fed in the topic. And so if I fed in the topic and I said, I want to look for what are the hidden disabilities under the Americans with Disabilities Act. Now, I know a bunch of them because hidden disabilities are pretty easy to think about, but I don't know them all. I could come up with some, it's heart disease, it's diabetes, it could be, back issues, migraine headaches, but there's more than that. So I just put it into AI, and it spit out like 25 hidden disabilities. And that then allowed me to do some research on those and start melding those into the PowerPoint. The next thing I asked it to do is put together some slides for me and I started naming the 25 different things it gave me. And it then built slides. Now, they weren't perfect, but they were better than I would have probably gotten if I gave it to a paralegal or if I gave it to an assistant. And it's better than I would have put together. And so within, less than 5 minutes, I had a slide deck of like 30 different slides. Now, they need work, but at least they gave me a build out of things that I can now work on, do some more research with. That would have probably taken hours to do. So, part of what you need to do in terms of your decision making is how you're going to use it. I'm very careful in how I use it. I've used it to draft a demand letter without putting any types of names in. I've had it do a response to a demand letter without putting any names in, and just giving it, you can put John Doe as the name and ABC as the corporation, and then you can put the entire document into it and let it give you a response or let it give you a demand. That's how I'm using it. Now, again, that doesn't mean that's how you have to use it. And there's other things I'm sure that I could probably use it for, and I will continue to use it for. But right now, I'm just trying to give you a couple of examples. So, even if you have some AI tools that are specifically used in your practice, there's tons of errors that come out of it. It's not all up to date. It only draws off the information it can get. And so a lot of these are not up to date. So if you're using ChatGPT in one of the older versions, you're probably pulling information from 2019 and 2020 and nothing more. So you've got to be careful when you're using those. So let me turn this back to my good friend Tricia and let her give you some interesting concepts about confidentiality.
All right. Those are great examples, Steve. It's so useful in everyday life and in your professional life. I think people really just get in there and start playing around with the different tools. You can rapidly get up to speed on this. So let's talk about confidentiality. As we worked on this particular paragraph, one of the things we wanted to be clear about is that the policy doesn't specifically limit the use of tools that are designed for the legal industry, in part because just like adding the word wedding before cake increases the price immensely, adding legal before AI tool is going to increase the price immensely. And it may not even be necessary because there are lots of tools out there like Copilot that are not specifically for the legal industry, but may be perfectly appropriate. So long as a tool is designed to comply with our ethics obligations, then it may be an appropriate tool for your firm to be using. So we didn't want to narrow this down to only tools designed for the legal industry. That seemed to be too narrow to us. Nevertheless, the confidentiality obligations that we have under our ethics rules are sacred, really. If you think about it, this is one of the most important things that we provide to our clients is to maintain their trust in our confidentiality so that they can tell us what they need to tell us so that we can exercise the independent judgment so important to our profession. So make sure as you begin using AI tools, make sure that you are honoring those obligations around confidentiality. Do not be cavalier with your client's information, especially with their personal PII, their personal identifiable information. Make sure that anything you put into a public source tool like a ChatGPT is scrubbed of all identifying information for a client. The best idea to get a sense of whether or not a tool is appropriate to use in your practice is to look at the tool's privacy policy. All of the tools are going to have this. Not long ago, I ran across a new tool, and tools are coming out all the time. So you've got to stay on your toes, you got to be in the game, and you got to be looking at what's coming out as it comes out. And so I saw some of the promotions around this new tool that was coming out, and it was specifically promoting, it's a contract drafting tool, and we're transactional attorneys. So I thought, ooh, that could be great, right? And I went and looked first at the terms of service and then at the privacy policy. And this was a tool that's specifically targeted to lawyers, right? It's a contract drafting tool. And I looked at the contracts, their terms of service and their privacy policy, which are contracts, and they were so badly drafted that I didn't even go any further into looking at how the tool actually worked, because clearly these were people who were not serious about making sure that the tool was going to be something that we could use and meet our ethics obligations. So it didn't take long to rule out that tool just by going to look at the privacy policy and the terms of service. So confidentiality is so important. Do not be cavalier with it. And our confidentiality paragraph was very carefully drafted. It's one of the ones that we really spent quite a bit of time on. So read that carefully and take as much or as little as you like from that. So let's talk about validation and oversight. A little bit ago, I was talking about how I used ChatGPT to narrow down the kinds of tires that I needed for my farm truck. I've also used it because I've got to go buy a new to me car. And there's so many cars out in the marketplace right now. And I have some quirky needs for what I need my car to do. And I used ChatGPT to narrow down. I said, this is what I'm going to use my car for. You know, what kind of vehicle do I need? And it gave me a short list. Well, just like with the tires, I'm going to go talk to a mechanic and validate what I learned from ChatGPT to make sure that the tires we have in mind are actually the right tires. So we'll get that validation from an expert. And the short list of cars that I have, I'm going to go test drive all of them, right? I'm going to validate them. You've got to do the same thing with the AI tools that you're using in your practice. AI does make mistakes. It's called hallucinations, if you're not familiar with that term. There are hallucinations where AI will make up stuff. And even legal AI tools, ones that are very carefully designed for our profession, can still lack context and nuance. They can be more of a blunt instrument, so to speak. So you've got to make sure that you're validating and exercising oversight of whatever the AI tools produce for you. The issue of copyright is a harder one to navigate. That's something you need to stay abreast of, as I think our courts are going to be tasked with having to figure out what a copyright violation is when something is coming out of an AI tool that's perhaps derivative in some way. So just be watching for that as that evolves, and be very careful with the use of documents that, you know, could be drawing from documents that are protected by copyright, documents or other ideas in a fixed media. So use validation and oversight for sure with your AI tools. And then finally, let's talk about authorization of AI tools. So if you are in a position of leadership within your firm you really need to lean into this. You must provide the supervision and the leadership that others in your firm are counting on from all of the people who are in positions of leadership. You know, that really applies to AI as well. I'm managing partner of Dunlap Law. We have a variety of experience here. You know, one of my partners has 50 years of practice in the legal industry, and one of our associates has 2. So it's my role as managing partner to really be in this whole question of how AI is appropriate for our team and how we're going to use it and what kind of policies we're going to have, what kind of training we're going to have. We have quarterly town hall meetings as a firm, and our next town hall meeting is in mid-July, and we will absolutely be tackling AI and training around that. So if you're in a leadership position, lean into that and make sure that AI is part of your leadership role in your firm. If you're not in a leadership position, if you are in a more junior role, then hopefully you'll be getting leadership and guidance from the more senior attorneys in your firm, and particularly from the managing partner. But if you're not getting that guidance, then it's your job to go ask for it. Do not start using any AI tools before you have clearance from the leadership in your team. The policy addresses all of that. Make sure that you are, if you're in a junior role, that you are asking for the appropriate level of support and guidance and a firm-wide policy, whether it's this one or some part of it. Make sure you are getting what you need in order to appropriately deal with the emergence of AI for our profession. And now I'm going to throw it back to Steve.
Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about the client authorization for AI. Tricia, have they seen the policy? Is the policy out there yet? Or no?
They each received a link to the policy, so they can access it now.
So if you take a look at the policy, if you want to, on paragraph 6, this is we crafted some language that you could put into an engagement letter for a client. Now, everybody's going to look at this, and I'm sure since we're all lawyers, everybody's going to have changes that they don't like this and they don't like that. Remember, it's a model policy. This is model language. If you don't like it, as Tricia said, take what you want, or just Tricia said, take what you want, leave what you don't want. But when you look at that on paragraph 6, if you get a chance to take a look at it, it's a consent to use of technology. It's a good idea to have something like this in your engagement letter for your clients so they understand what you're using. They should already know that you're using Westlaw or Nexus or LexisNexis, but it also mentions using generative or artificial intelligence platforms to conduct research, develop work product, and so forth. It's a very, we spent a lot of time on the consent to use of technology policy, our section of this policy, to try to give you something that you could take and be able to send it to your clients. We're also very careful within this language to make it very clear. Now, you got to be careful. If you're not doing the training, it says the firm conducts training on the proper and effective use of technologies. It engages knowledgeable technology contractors and employs protective adjacent technologies. If you're not doing things like that in terms of the training, don't put that in there. The one thing you better be doing as part of this is we talk about firewalls, encryption, malware screening. Every firm should have that. You're going to have a problem if you don't. And Tricia already mentioned, what the issue was with the tax returns that were sent, but you should definitely at least have the minimal amount of firewalls, encryption, and malware screening. And we also put a recognizing kind of a disclaimer in there at the end of it saying, there are risks in the method of storage, transmission, and management of client materials and data, and that you consent to the firm's use of technologies and acknowledge the firm's taking reasonable precautions in using it. It's helpful to be able to have that type of language in terms of consent so that your clients understand what you're doing. I don't know how much your clients read your engagement letters. They probably don't read it a ton, but it does protect you. If you've ever had to litigate something over your engagement letter, and I've had to do that in the past, you definitely want to make sure it's a pretty solid letter. So having this type of language in there will help you down the road. especially if there's ever any type of dispute or any type of question. But usually there's no dispute at all. But let's talk about a little bit about open communication and how the policy in paragraph 7 of the policy, deals with open communication within the firm. Tricia's talked about that, and I've talked about that. You need to really be talking within your firm about AI and, how it works, how you can use it, how you shouldn't use it. It should be as easy of a conversation as it is when you talked about Westlaw and Lexis. We don't think twice about Lexis and Westlaw. We don't think twice about email. Tricia mentioned email, and email was not something that we used. And again, I'll date myself, but back in the day when you ran a conflict check in my old firm back in the 90s, the early 90s, you sent around a paper conflict check in an envelope, and you had to cross your name out in the envelope and then send it to the next person. There weren't email communicate. There was not very much email communication at all. I remember when we first got it, and everybody laughed. Now, many of you on here, if you're younger, you're going to, what are you talking about, laughed? Well, a lot of us laughed because when people said, we're going to send you email, I'm like, yeah, I'm fine with faxes. I'm fine with the regular mail. My secretary will open the mail and I'll read the mail. I don't need something called email. I mean, what in the world is email? That's nonsense to me. My practice is perfectly fine in 1994, the way it was. Well, think about that. It was 30 years ago. And I'm sitting there chirping, thinking, as a fourth-year associate, I don't need something called email. And the IT people said, we're going to put it on your laptop computer. And I said, I don't want a laptop computer. I don't need to take that home. I like my desktop. They said, well, your desktop's being replaced. And 30 years ago, I'm like, being replaced? I don't want to take that home. Well, of course, I took it home, and we had something called dial-up. And you guys don't even know what that is. Most of you on here, but a lot of you do. And it used to make—
You've got mail.
Yeah, you dial up into and it was slow as could be. All that stuff 30 years ago, I looked at and said, this will never last. This is the dumbest thing in the world. I don't know why we're using this stuff. And now that's all we do. Do we even mail things? I mail things very rarely. Most letters we send are over email. All of our encrypted information comes over email. The mail, you don't get much mail anymore if you think about it. There's just not much mail. And these days, that's how we operate. So think, again, I'm going to tell you, think 10 years into the future where you will be with AI. It'll be comfortable. You remember when the iPhone came out? And you're like, I can't believe a smartphone. I remember when I had a car phone that was mounted in my car. And so that was my car phone. Now I carry around a computer in my pocket. So all these types of things you should be doing in a law firm, you should be talking about these things and normalize it. AI is not something that should be scary. It should be something that you're afraid of using. It should be something you should use as a tool. So let me send this. I think Tricia and I are both going to do the next slide together. And that's on the summary. So, I'll take the first two bullets and I'll take the first one and let Tricia jump in, or she can just interrupt me and take whatever she wants. But, we've intended to, help you develop this as a firm policy. Again, we tried to give you something that we thought would be useful. We knew that firms were struggling with how to put this out or how to deal with AI. And so part of what the VBA is doing is really the premier bar association, handling these types of issues. We're going to handle this with education for you too this summer. We've got some educational models that we'll talk about at the end on how to actually do AI searches. That's not what Tricia and I are going to teach, but we have somebody that really knows what he's doing on how to do those things that can really walk us through it. But part of it is to help you get a policy in place, because we're very policy driven. Lawyers are very regulatory driven and rule following. And so if you don't really have a policy and you don't have guardrails, it feels like it's all loosey-goosey, and we were trying to put an end to that. So, that's part of why we decided to develop the policy. Tricia, what do you think about kind of the summary of this?
Well, we'll beat the drum again here, but this policy can't possibly be comprehensive. There's just too much happening in the AI landscape right now. It's very dynamic. It's very exciting, quite frankly. So this policy is a starting point, and you should absolutely be in the game and exercising your own independent judgment, which of course, as a lawyer, is what you do every day. So hopefully this policy is a good start for that. And it will break down some of whatever trepidation you might have about using AI tools. And you'll start getting into ChatGPT and checking that out. practicing with your own prompts. And by the way, prompt engineering, if you're not familiar with that term, you can go look it up. Prompt engineering is now a thing. And the better your prompt, the better your result will be. Garbage in, garbage out. So learn how to do prompts properly and use this policy for whatever your firm needs it to be. We hope it's been helpful, and hopefully we'll be able to answer your questions here in just a second.
Thank you both, Steve and Tricia. We're all a little concerned about the risks and opportunities tied to the rapid advancement of AI technologies. This VBA Model AI Policy, along with our continued efforts to educate the legal community about AI, will help lawyers across the state feel more confident about this topic and about using AI. I think this is true especially for lawyers in small practice who may not have experts on their staff who can provide that kind of guidance and support. Everyone registered for today's webinar received a link to the VBA Model AI Policy. You can access that document at vba.org/AI-policy. As you see on your screen, or you can use the QR code shown here and store that in your phone. In the next few days, you'll get information on accessing these slides and a recording of the session. As a service to the legal profession in Virginia, the VBA invites you to share this information broadly. We want to get the word out, and we want to get this policy in as many law firms' hands as possible so they can begin to build their own policies. Meanwhile, please bookmark the site vba.org/AI. This is a site where we'll be posting all of our upcoming VBA education webinars on AI. We do have sessions scheduled coming up in July and August offering demonstrations on how to use ChatGPT to support litigation prep and to support transactional work. So again, vba.org/AI to access information on our AI educational series. If you'd like to be part of Virginia's leader in AI education for lawyers and other VBA initiatives, you can learn more about the VBA and possibly join if you have not already at vba.org and at vba.org/join. Let's look now and see what questions we have from the audience. What are your thoughts on the Lexis AI add-on? Is it worth the additional cost at this stage? I don't know that our speakers want to comment on any technical questions. But of course, if they have knowledge on this, go right ahead.
I'm happy to comment and say that being at a small firm, I am not familiar with the Lexis AI add-on. It's not something that I would have budget for at this point. So I haven't looked at it. I don't know. I'd love to see a demo of it. And hopefully Lexis will be at the summer meeting, VBA's summer meeting at the Homestead. And perhaps they can show us a demo at that time, and maybe they'll change my mind and I'll have to find some budget money for their tool.
Now that you said you love it, I'm sure Lexis, somebody from Lexis is probably on this webinar, and you'll be getting a call saying, hey, we would love to set up a demo to show you.
It would have to be a very valuable tool in order for me to find some budget money for that right now, but perhaps, maybe.
So we're looking at the Westlaw tool. We don't use Lexis, and we're looking at the Westlaw AI tool. Two of our folks in our firm are now studying that. They were very impressed by what it could do, how you could load different things into it, load a complaint in, and it would give you interrogatories that you could send, load a deposition in, it'd give you a deposition summary. There's a variety of things that it can do for you. Again, you've got to check it. So we did something about a couple of weeks ago for one of our clients. We were putting together a summary of some bylaw changes that they wanted. So yes, Tricia, I dabble in doing some corporate related things, not as much as you, but do a little bit of governance for some clients on some board governance issues. And one thing they wanted to know is, the changes to their bylaws, what's a summary for the board? So the board didn't have to read 34 pages of a red line. And we cranked it through the system. It gave us C+ work. It needed to be updated, got some things wrong, got the client's name, got some stuff wrong. The client's name wasn't in there, and we put a different piece in there for the client's name, but it got kind of the whole corporate entity part wrong. But that's what you're there to fix. So, I would encourage you, if you have the budget, to look at Lexis AI, look at Westlaw AI. I think Case Text has something. There's a variety of folks that have things out there that's worth looking at.
The next question, are there plans for future model policies? And I assume this is additional versions of the model AI policy. For example, a model policy for in-house counsels or localities or other attorneys not in traditional law firms. I think that this policy grew out of our special committee for small firm and solo practice. So our committee had not considered additional versions. Steve, can you comment on this from the task force point of view?
I don't know that at this point. I can tell you we'll look into it. It's like I used to say with my kids, we'll see. That meant no. So I don't mean no. But as a volunteer group, it's probably not going to happen that we're going to write multiple policies on this. We think the VBA this model policy we've given, folks can really turn that into whatever they need it to be. It's governed that it can handle a law firm, but you also can use it for in-house counsel. You can use it for a variety of different ways if you want to tweak it. I don't know that we're going to put out different tweaks of that. I can always ask to see if somebody's interested in doing that, but with limited bandwidth for volunteers, I don't know that I'm going to get it. It took us long enough to go through putting together a 3-page policy amongst our subcommittee, because as lawyers, we all have multiple opinions and multiple drafts. So I would probably tell you it's probably not likely that we would do that, but I will run that up the flagpole and see if anybody wants to take that on.
Steve, I think one challenge in doing that too is that we would have to have a significant substantive input from people in those roles. I've never been in-house counsel, so I don't really understand the unique challenges and the landscape of that type of position. So I would not feel like I'm qualified to adapt this policy for an in-house counsel kind of situation. So that would make it even harder really for volunteers to pull this together. And I think we started in January, and frankly, hat off to Tricia. Tricia did a tremendous amount of work to keep us moving and keep herding the cats and keeping it along the way. And so it was a significant investment of her time, which means that she, of course, can't be doing other things she needs to do for VBA. So I echo Steve. I doubt that we will do that, but you're welcome to take the policy and adapt it for your needs.
Next question. What tools do Steve and Tricia use?
So I use ChatGPT fairly regularly. Give you an example of how I used it. And I have the subscription version, not the free version, which they have continued to improve the tool since it was first made publicly available. And the 4.0 version is much more accurate than earlier free versions. So I had to produce a memo recently for a client that explained shareholders' rights in Virginia. And I pulled out the piece of code and I went into ChatGPT and I gave it the prompt and I gave it the voice I wanted. I said, summarize the provisions of Virginia code. And I gave it the code, the authority that I wanted it to use rather than relying on the tool to pull that authority. I gave it the authority and I said, summarize the shareholders' rights in authoritative voice. So you can actually tell ChatGPT the kind of voice you want it to use, and that's what it will produce for you. And that was certainly not the final product, but in a matter of 30 seconds, I got the bulleted list of, you know, the shareholders' rights the universal shareholders' rights sort of more broadly. And it's very easy to take that and then delete the ones that aren't relevant to my particular client, clean it up, make sure it's worded in a way that is going to work for the client. And instead of, you know, I don't know, 45 minutes or an hour's worth of work to make sure I'm not missing anything, right? I was able to produce what I needed for the client in, you know, 10 minutes, which, by the way, ties into, as AI becomes more prevalent, the time that we spend on drafting is perhaps a business model that should be revisited. And that's why at Dunlap Law, we're working hard on value-based billing and on flat fee billing. So anyway, back to the question, I use ChatGPT. I'm the only one at my firm currently who's using it for any kind of legal work. I'm sort of tiptoeing into it for legal work. We do use ChatGPT for perhaps some blog posts or some social media marketing posts, things like that are not law related or client work related. I'm about to deploy Microsoft's Copilot for me to begin using and begin demoing. Copilot is a closed loop tool. And for what it's worth, Microsoft has a fantastic podcast all about technologies and the technologies they're developing. They're really a leader. So if you have the Microsoft Enterprise Suite, you know, the E5 suite of services, Copilot is part of that. You're already paying for it. And it's closed. The privacy policy is compatible with law firm ethics. So I'm about to deploy Copilot. And I've tried to get into Canva. Canva has some AI tools. If you don't know what Canva is, it's a graphic arts tool. But I'm pretty tragic at that anyway. So I didn't do that for very long. And I was like, yeah, I'll let somebody else do this. Graphics are not my strong suit.
And I use Copilot, and it's very good. And it does have a good podcast. If you want to listen to some other podcasts, there's somebody you can actually subscribe to. He's called Ernie the Attorney. You're going to think, what the heck is that? It sounds like Sesame Street. It's not. If you'll Google him, he's got wonderful podcasts on how to manage a small law firm. They actually apply to medium and large law firms as well. But he has a ton of stuff on AI and on really software that you can use to help you, you know, virtual assistants, a variety of different things that many of you probably haven't tried. I would subscribe to Ernie the Attorney and listen to some of his podcasts. They're on YouTube. They're wonderful. They're 20 minutes usually, and you get a wealth of information. He's already tried a number of these things. And so it's helpful for you to have kind of that resource as well to help you as you navigate through the AI world. I think that's all the questions we have.
I think that's all the questions we have.
Look at that. We're going to end on time. What are the odds?
How about that? We are ending on time and possibly a couple of minutes ahead of time. Thank you all for joining us today. I hope that the VBA Model AI Policy will be a help to you as you begin to navigate this new frontier in legal technology. Steve and Tricia, thank you so very much for sharing your time with us today. This has been a great service and actually I think a very good webinar. I'm glad we're all here, and I'm glad we had a lot of folks with some interest and some questions. Again, this is just one in a series of AI education that the VBA is sponsoring through the rest of this year and will continue. So again, it's vba.org/AI, and you will be receiving these slides, a copy of a link to the policy again, and some additional resources in the next few days. So thank you for your participation. Thanks again, Steve, Tricia. Thanks, Megan, for being our producer. And I look forward to seeing you next time.